So, a thought experiment. Let's say we need to move to a new planet. You know, we couldn't save this one, so we need to move, but you know, luckily we invented teleporting. So we can teleport there, all right, everyone, and there's plenty of food and plants and everything in the new planet. However, there is only one cargo ship that we can take. It is the size of this room. Only one cargo ship for the entire humanity that we can send to the new planet. And you get to decide what to put in this cargo ship. What would it be? Think about it. It's one cargo ship. It's people and cargo. Any ideas?
Are people teleported and in the cargo ship only the goods?
Yeah, you can put other stuff in the cargo ship. All the people teleported with their clothes.
I would put DNA of all the food.
No, it's plenty of food. Everything that we have on Earth is in the new planet. It's a new planet just like Earth, just without humans. Yeah.
Okay, I didn't understand.
So what do we?
Mars.
What do we take? We need this for 8 billion people, so the room is not a lot. Star Wars. Star Wars, you're in the right direction. It's part of our culture, history, right?
Hard drives.
Hard drives, yes, Brock, exactly. Exactly, information. Humanity is an information generating superorganism. This is the most important thing that we ever created. It's all our history and all our future, all our knowledge. This is what we do. This is what the value that we create. Now, let's talk a little bit about information. 3 things you can do with information. You can process information, you can transfer information, and you can store information. That's what we do with information. It's very simple. And let's talk about the steps in the evolution of information. The first one, anthropological. So, you know, the first thing was the brain, information processing machine. Animal has it too. They process information as well. But what makes us different than animal is that we are able to transfer information as well very efficiently, more efficiently than animal, theoretically speaking, as far as we know. But the ability to store information, which is writing, is the difference between us and hunter-gatherer, because it allows us to accumulate information over generation, to write the Bible, to write books. That is really what took humanity forward. We had the exact same 3 steps in the technological realm. First, computers, hardware and software. It was all about processing information. That was, you know, back in the 50s, I think, when it started to happen, and computers were connected in a network, and right after that we invented, if you have computers in a network, we have a database where the databases essentially allow you to store information over time, transferring over space and storing over time. Now, databases, back in the 60s, started to change every human institution on Earth, governments, banks, everything, before many of us were born. And now there's this third phase that is not well acknowledged, I think. So we're going to focus on this one. And this is the social phase, because it's not about technology, it's about technology standard. The first standard was the IBM PC. We used to call it IBM compatible computers. You remember? We don't use that term anymore because all computers are IBM compatible. Completely took over. Even Apple is IBM compatible. So that was the first standard. It was the leading reason for the revolution of the PC computer in the 80s. That's what happened. Then we had all those networks, but on, you know, we started actually in the 80s, but it actually caught on close to year 2K, the standard of networking. We call it the internet. We had many proprietary networks before that. I used them, like BBS, stuff like that. But when we had a standard for information transfer, we call it the internet. That changed the world completely, and most of us really experienced the effect of that standard. That was actually the precursor to the processing not in the hardware level but in the software level to create standards around software, because when you have computers and you have the internet, you can build open source software. And we started to build first an operating system, the browsers and everything you can imagine, which is again taking software that was a proprietary piece of information and making it something which is an agreement, a standard. How do you know that it's an agreement, that it's a standard? Because it can be forked. And we've seen a lot of fork in open source, but it's really about people saying, you know, this is what we're going to use, using it, building it together, owning it together. That's the idea of standards. No one owns them. It's an agreement. No one owns an agreement. And the latest one, blockchain. Blockchain, which actually is built upon open source, that is built upon the internet, that is built upon IBM PC standard. The blockchain standards actually allowed us not just to move information through space, but actually to carry information through time. And let me give you an example. If I send you a Bitcoin transaction right now, we can know that in 10 years, we can go log into the internet and read that transaction. It's going to be there, assuming Bitcoin still has value. And that is actually a key point, because transfer information doesn't cost anything. You know, it doesn't cost anything for me to transfer information talking to you right now. But if we want to preserve this information forever, as they seem to be doing right now, that's going to have some cost. They're going to have a hard drive, put it there, needs to be electric. For people to be able to access this stock to forever, that will have costs. And that's why blockchain protocols, unlike internet protocol, requires tokens. They require tokens, because tokens is essentially a method for us to sponsor those who are hosting those services, those who are hosting the blockchain. We call them miners, we call them block producers, but what they are, essentially, they are hosting what we like to call open source services. Not open source software, but open source services. That's a new thing. Never existed before, and it's very, very powerful. I mean, think about what open source did. Let's talk about that for a second. So, I purposely deleted the idea of natural information tech monopolies, because people seem to look at tech monopolies and think, oh, that's a natural monopoly, and we should try to build a natural monopoly. There's no such thing as natural monopoly in tech. There's only temporary monopolies in tech. And I'll show you. You know, before the IBM PC, what we had, Atari, Commodore, Apple, and all those created their own network effect around their software, around their hardware. And if you're Apple, then everyone would buy Apple because this is good for designer, because a lot of equipment is for Apple, and you create a network effect. Before the internet, by the way, the IBM PC removed all those companies from, you know, just all those architecture, all those proprietary architecture gone. Also before the internet. So the same thing, we had many, many networks, all gone. They were proprietary network. Each one also had a network effect. AOL, you've got mail, you know, come and use our service because everyone using our service. That was a selling point. And network effect is something that generates value. The bigger the network, the more value it generates. We all know that. However, when you're talking about a proprietary system, the value is captured by the manufacturer, by the company, by the corporation. But when you're talking about standards, when it's IBM PC or the internet standard, the value that is generated by the network effect gets to the end user. We are the beneficiaries of the network effect of the internet, not any specific corporation. They all compete for prices. Same goes for open source. Before open source, Microsoft, Novell, Lotus, all these giants. Who thought that Microsoft not, you know, going to fall one day? I thought it's going to rule the world forever. I was young and stupid, but that's what I thought. And when we're talking about blockchain, who are the rulers of today? Who are running the world today? It's the online services. You know, before every age, we have the monopolies that, you know, that are coming before the standards. And today, the monopolies is Amazon and Google and YouTube and Facebook and Twitter. I mean, why on earth those databases, those services should be private? That it makes as much sense as me telling you right now, hey, you want to use my own proprietary network? It's better than the internet. Come use my network. And who would want to use my network? We have a network that everyone uses. No one owns it. It's much better. Same goes here. There's no rationale in the universe to use proprietary services when you have alternatives that are public, that are open, that are owned by us. I mean, does it make sense that all the buyers and all the sellers in the world would have to use Amazon to sell their stuff? Why wouldn't that be a public database? Who would, yeah, and we see every year Amazon just increase its market share. I mean, that's what happened when you have a proprietary platform. So, and I think that's the most important aspect of blockchain. It's completely missed from the conversation. And you know why? Because if you look, what was the first database in history used for? What was they used for? They used for ledgers. Ledgers in banks. That's how they use computers. So if the first database in history was used for banks, for running ledgers, it only makes sense that, the first decentralized database, the first open source services that offer those kind of things would be ledger, would run a ledger. And not only that, it's also important in order to fund the operation of the ledger. How does it fund it? It funds it in the following way. If I want to send a Bitcoin transaction, I need Bitcoin. I would need to pay a fee, whether it's Ethereum or Bitcoin, or maybe in EOS, I will need to lock some EOS. So I need the currency in order to use the database. And the same currency, the same token is issued to those who host it. So when I buy this token, I actually increase the market price of the token, which allow someone else to sell it, the one that is getting it. So we're all funding those services through tokens. And that's the meaning of token. It's not, I saw many of the sessions, it's really not about, we're going to replace all the money in the world tomorrow. It's really not about that quite yet. Let's be a little bit patient. It's about doing something, I think, much more important. It's about making the internet, and I would say information standard complete. It's the last step. Yeah, we did standardization for processing with hardware and software. We did the standardization for transferring with the internet protocol. And now is the last step of standardization of database and services. And when you do that, then you open the internet in such a way that you can have 1 million clients to Amazon that all use the same database. Because right now, Amazon and Google and YouTube and Facebook, they all control the authentication of their users. What we're doing with blockchain, and that's how blockchain works, is that we're taking the authentication capability back to us. We have digital signature. So we don't need to rely on third party to authenticate us. They cannot be hacked. They cannot be hacked because the data is public. We can store encrypted data on blockchain, that's not a problem. But then there's nothing to hack. Only a personal computer, a personal account on someone's computer can be hacked, but not the general system, as happens today again and again and again. Standards are mass social agreements. And that's a very, very powerful thing. If you think about it, the reason that people are not killing each other in the street is because mass social agreement. We call it laws, we call it constitution, we call it states, we call it manners. But the mass social agreements is what take us forward every time. And it's really not about the technology. It's really about the ability to agree on the technology. So, as I said, standards bring the value created by network effects from monopolies to the people. And we should remember that blockchain is first and foremost about that. It's not about just money. It actually used the concept of money in order to enable funding a service that is completely distributed, that is not owned by anyone, that anyone can take part in running it, and anyone can compete in running it, and that's what we need the currencies. Not to replace the dollar or the gold or any of them tomorrow. And I heard Brock Pierce says yesterday that he agreed with many of the things that Nouriel Roubini says. And I have to say that I agree as well. Nouriel Roubini is seeing a lot of engineers that are speaking about economics as if that's what they're doing in the last 20 years. And they know that Bitcoin will be the next currency, and they know It doesn't work this way. We're engineers. We understand technology. It is really about technology. We're using economic knowledge and we're using economic tools in order to power the next wave of technology. But it's really not about changing the economy as much as it's about changing computers and computing and dissolving monopolies. Anyway, that has been my talk. Thank you very much. And if there's time for questions.
So I guess my question would be to Arthur. We were talking a little bit earlier. I mean, feel free to chime in as well. But what do you see as based on everything he just presented? Where does Holochain fit in? Is it in that like what if blockchain is the next piece? Is Holochain like how does Holochain figure in that cosmology, as it were?
Well, I hear him using the word blockchain in a general sense rather than a specific sense to reference distributed technology. Is that, yes. For me, I think he's describing what Holochain is set out to do in terms of be able to replace the Facebooks, Twitters, that kind of stuff. We think blockchain can actually operate on that scale and more importantly, can reach mainstream users right now where like I was just at this ETH Denver event where a person got up on the stage and shows this complicated flow chart. It's like, these are the 22 steps that it takes for somebody to start using a dApp. Before they can start using a dApp, here's the 22 steps, right? And then just like, now we're really excited to take things mainstream. We've gotten it down to these 14 steps, like, okay. So with Holo hosting as a bridge to general web browsers, it's the same experience as using a website. You can just type it into your address bar. When you need to make a change, then a host is going to have to generate a source chain for you and start hosting that. And we're going to generate keys, even though you don't know you're generating keys. You just enter your email and password, and we, from all of that, generate a bunch of extra randomness, attach it to the email, blah, blah, blah. The point being, if we can't get blockchain type technology, if we can't get distributed tech to be able to go mainstream in those small steps to make it a convenient, adjacent, possible thing, we're not really going to be able to replace that stuff. And to me, that's where we've focused a lot of our energy on Holochain.
Thank you both for very fascinating contributions. So what I'd like to look for is synthesize, both your presentations. On one hand, I see your differential development in terms of wealth, and I fully agree also with your developments, but I see also that the wealth effect is, very much highly monopolistic. As I see with blockchain, I think still it's a question mark. But so I'm trying to, as I said, trying to combine both your presentations, or at least to see some commonality within both your presentations. And that's something I would like you to comment on, Arthur. So to what extent I think is the view of potentially monopolistic wealth, does that time with your development, or where are we seeing things wrong, or where are we actually going wrong with respect to the development of the blockchain?
I just want to say that, I think, you talk a lot about tokens and stuff, the different kind of tokens. And I think what's connecting between the two is what I'm presenting is essentially saying, look, until today, in order to have those, for example, to host tokens, to run tokens, to use tokens, you would need to use some kind of a centralized service that, again, would capture the network effect and can be shut down and all of those things. And what open source services allow us to do, essentially, is one of the things it allows us to do is to issue tokens, to use cryptocurrencies. But this is just one of the things. If you remember, that was the big deal with Ethereum. That was the big success of Ethereum. It was the first platform that really took off, and everyone used it, or many used it, including us, to issue tokens. And that was the killer app. And I think that's just the first one, just like ledgers or the first app for database. That was just the first app for decentralized database, for distributed database. But we're going to see many, many more. We're going to see the Facebooks and the Googles and all that. And I think that the concept of decentralized open source services being the platform to run any of the kind of tokens and the kind of, I would say, economic experiments. And this is really what it's all about. It's the ability to experiment, because when we had the internet, all of a sudden anyone can post a video. And that is something that changed the world of media. The fact that anyone can broadcast video, and the fact that anyone can record a podcast changed the world of, I would say, the way that we learn. The fact that anyone can write a blog changed journalism forever. So when you have this platform that allows you to experiment with tools like tokens, like credentials, like rights, like ownership, then we can imagine where it will take us. Just like we couldn't imagine where the internet would take us when we just had email. We had no idea, but we had a strong feeling that it's going to be big and it's going to be amazing. And I think that this is exactly what happens, and I think it's the same case here.
So I have a slightly weirder answer, I think. To me, we look at the evolution of communication, language, and the forms like he was giving examples, writing and that kind of thing, as critical to the evolution of humanity. I mean, if you just look at two things that have shaped the planet in serious ways are language and money, right? Like, we literally move mountains for money, and we coordinate that action through language, right? And so for me, there's another layer behind what Eyal was showing, because his focus was a little bit more on the coordinative capacity of language. But like the earliest examples of writing, just like the first examples of using and storing data was a ledger, right? The earliest examples of writing were accounting, were just tick mark type things and a little symbol of what you're counting and that kind of stuff. That's a pretty primitive form of writing, right? Where we're at now has a lot more expressive capacity. What I am suggesting is that what we identify as money is a very primitive form of currency, that there's actually an explosion of currencies that has occurred that we don't know how to recognize. We don't even see it as a class of object, but it is a part of where we're actually encoding our social intelligence for how we coordinate in very complex ways. I mean, you pull 250,000 people into a building and coordinate where they're going to go with a little thing called a Super Bowl ticket that has, the section and the row and the seat or whatever, right? We're solving a complex flow problem with this little piece of paper. And we do this all over the place without recognizing this pattern. To me, it's so weird. It's kind of like not recognizing the class of stuff called architecture, because this building's made out of wood and this one's made out of brick and this one's made out of metal and glass, but the principles are still the same. And so what I'm suggesting is actually that we've become very enamored with our industrial age currencies that are based on scarcity and a bunch of, I think, pretty kind of shallow principles in the expressive capacity of currencies, and whole new realms open up available to us from things like blockchain, but things like computers. It's already happening, not on distributed systems, but it changes the economics completely. And so, different era.
Just on concentration of wealth, I think what I'm trying to show is that that's what is breaking. I mean, today there is a lot of concentration of wealth with online services. And just like, again, the PC standard broke the concentration of wealth around platforms, like the internet broke the concentration of wealth around networks. And you have smaller ISPs, and small ISP can definitely compete. Then today the concentration of wealth is with these huge conglomerates that are running the world databases. And I think this is the technology that is going to make it much more competitive and much more distributed in terms of distribution of wealth. Yeah, I think there will be, and I think the same thing as with open source. So if I'm running the Linux project today, I cannot, add a feature that bring my team a lot of profits. And the reason I cannot do that is because the threat of forking. Because anyone can fork what I do, take everything that I did, and we saw that happening in blockchain again and again, even too many times. I mean, if blockchain is a mass agreement, forking is the breaking of that agreement to maybe two different agreements that are taking their own path. And I cannot fork Facebook, even if I want, I cannot. But I can definitely fork Bitcoin or Ethereum or EOS. I can take the exact state they have right now, and the users that they hold the private keys for their account, they will be able to log into my service just as they were able to log into the other one. And when you have this threat of forking, it really dictates much different behavior. So as much as you like to think that you have all this power, you don't. And it's really up to us to kind of recognize our power as users to choose which services best serve us, something that we cannot do today. We can scream at Facebook, we can scream at Amazon, we can scream at Google, not going to help us.
For me, I have a problem with the framing of the question, because turning it immediately into exchange is like saying that women's work would be valuable as sex trade or as, do you know what I mean? Like, turning it immediately to exchange is reductive. And that was kind of the whole point of that thing about you can't reduce the levels of deeper wealth down to one dimension without breaking them. And what I think we actually have to do is understand that deeper wealth, that real wealth is in those deeper levels. We're actually killing ourselves by trying to turn everything into fungible units. And that's my struggle with tokenization, is that its focus is so much on fungible units. And where I think what we actually need to be doing is be getting a deeper relationship to the kind of wealth that that can't just be traded, and that isn't, like I was saying, this pound of beef is not equal to this pound of beef when this one's in a living cow, right? So it actually involves relational wealth, relational value, that things have value by being where they are. Like I was just talking with Kim about the rainforest, and he was talking about how the dimensions of valuing land are basically, is it already cleared for farming? How valuable is it for farming? It doesn't make visible the deep relational wealth that's there in a rainforest. And if we turn everything into fungible units, then all we're doing is making it more efficient to kill and extract the rainforest. And we need to actually have approaches that aren't just extractive.
What would you do?
Pardon?
What would you do
What do you do?
in that scenario?
Well, I was giving examples of different kinds of currencies that actually are used in those different levels, right? Certified organic, we don't trade the certification. It adds value to the food, right? Like fair trade is an example of, that there's some oversight that we're not basically using slave labor in producing this. You could start having, in fact, there are some rainforest certifications and things like that can be sustainably harvested, and right, there's a lot of ways of making deeper wealth visible, but those ways are not necessarily fungible tokens.